Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started on today's webinar, learn how to extend your VPN flexibility with Tailscale on USG Flex H series. My name is Marcus Holmes. I am the sales engineer here at Zyxel. I wanted to welcome you to this webinar. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you were at. I'm pretty excited about this particular webinar because we have introduced a couple months back on UOS 1.32 Tailscale VPN on our USG Flex H series. A little housekeeping, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. After the webinar is done, I will do a Q&A section where I will go through all of your questions. So as I go along, if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat window, and then I will go ahead and answer them at the very end of the webinar. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So again, today's webinar is about using the Tailscale VPN on the USG Flex H series. I want to preface this by saying that the Tailscale VPN is available on the local GUI. I believe there are plans to add it into the Nebula side. But right now, we're going to focus on how to set this up on the localized GUI of the USG Flex H series. So let's go ahead and get started. So Tailscale, basically what is Tailscale VPN? So Tailscale is a third-party VPN software that allows you to have encrypted peer-to-peer connections across devices in the network. It creates a mesh with the VPN for your VPN devices, whether it be the firewalls and a core client. And with this particular VPN, it does require a subscription. Now, we do not provide this subscription to the users. You have to go to Tailscale to get the license for that. So there is a per cost per user per month license structure with the Tailscale VPN. As of this recording, you can get a one node user, I believe, for free. But if you want to expand that out, it is roughly, I believe, $6 per month per user. So with the USG Flex H series, we actually have embedded the ability to have the Tailscale VPN on the firewall. So how does that work? So let's talk about why you would want to use Tailscale VPN. So Tailscale VPN doesn't rely on a centralized server to handle VPN connections. Like I said, it builds a mesh between the devices, and it makes it a lot more simpler to add any device you want to the VPN network. So when it comes to IPsec VPN, you have to install the software, and then you have to either provision it with the settings from the firewall, or you have to go in and enter all the settings manually. With Tailscale, it's as simple as adding a specific private key to the client that's generated on the Tailscale VPN's admin dashboard. So it makes it a lot easier to add nodes without the complicated setup. And the wonderful thing about Tailscale VPN is it's available for multiple platforms like Linux, Windows, Android, iOS, our routers, and also some NAS devices as well. So what does the architecture look like when it comes to setting up a VPN? So here we have two scenarios. On the left-hand side, we have what a traditional IPsec VPN looks like. And on the right side, we have the Tailscale VPN. So in a traditional IPsec VPN, when you have a hub and spoke VPN, you have your remote endpoints being the spokes, but then you have a centralized hub. So in a hub and spoke VPN, if we have some server assets that are behind a specific site over here on this spoke here, towards the top, and then we also have we have a client connected to another spoke, and we want to access something on the specific server, we have to go from the client through one of the spokes, through the hub, back to the other side of the spoke, and then reach the server. With the Tailscale VPN, what we can do is we can eliminate having to route through the hub itself. All we have to do is just basically have this mesh set up on Tailscale VPN where we can just go straight from the client to the spoke, the local spoke, or the hub, or the remote spoke. So we basically have eliminated the need to have a hub and spoke topology we can reach all the nodes specifically through the tailnet VPN. That's what it's called for Tailscale. It's tailnet. So in order for us to do this, we basically use UDP hole punching. So on the firewall, we actually have the UDP hole punch. It works on a specific UDP port, and it allows it to use the WireGuard tunnel protocol to reach through the VPN itself. Now, as far as the Tailscale VPN goes, there is an admin console that you have to set up. So the admin console is located directly on Tailscale's website. So when you create an account with Tailscale, you'll be introduced with a admin console. And this console is used to add your devices. So anytime you want to add a specific user to connect to the Tailscale VPN, you would go through your admin console, add that particular user, set up your keys, and then set up all of your routing. So the console is also used to not only authenticate devices, but monitor connections and add any new devices that you want on the VPN. Now, for the Windows side of things, you're going to have to use the IP helper service. So you'll need to make sure that in your services tab on your Windows OS, you need to make sure that your IP helper is running. So this is necessary because what's going to end up happening is when all your devices are connected to the Tailscale VPN, they'll be given their own IP address. So it's going to be located within the Tailnet VPN. You'll be given a specific 100.x.x.x address, and that is specific for Tailscale VPNs. And that's going to be used for the routing process, which you'll see shortly. So again, how does it work? We're going to be using the Tailscale VPN's UDP port 41641 by default. And again, you have to go into the Tailscale admin console, which is a web dashboard, to manage all of your networks for the Tailscale VPN. There's an authentication key that is used to register your devices. So instead of having a username and password for your clients to authenticate, you're given a generated key on the Tailscale VPN side. This key, you can have it set up to never expire, but by default, it's going to ask you to set an expiration date for the key so that you have to regenerate a new key for your devices every so often. So this is more done as a security option, making sure that your keys are not constantly being replicated. So if you do not have that key or that key expires, that device will no longer be part of the Tailscale VPN, or it will be, but it will not be able to communicate with devices on the Tailscale VPN network. So when it comes to routing on the firewall, and we're going to go through the setup here in just a moment, but when it comes to routing, what you do is once you've obtained that key from the Tailscale VPN admin dashboard, you're going to go into your firewall and you're going to input that key, and then you're going to decide which clients on your local side of your firewall will have access to the Tailscale VPN network. So here we have firewall A and we have firewall B. So on firewall A, we have LAN clients that have the subnet 192.168.168.0/24. When you set up the Tailscale VPN on the firewall, you're going to enter in this information and it will be advertised on Tailscale network as a route for devices to be reached. The same thing goes for the other side, which is firewall B. You would put in that specific firewall's network scheme, and it will be advertised to other Tailscale devices as a reachable network. What you can also do with the Tailscale VPN is you can route all your traffic through the firewall. So if you have a client that is connecting to, say, firewall A, and you want to push all traffic through firewall A alongside with the ability to reach the clients behind firewall B, there's an option on the firewall to choose that particular firewall as an exit node. What that means is that when you're routing all traffic through that particular firewall, when you go to find out what your IP is, what's my IP chicken, it will show up as the firewall's WAN IP address. And that's why you need to also enable the SNAT option. So it will bind that particular device with the firewall's public IP address. So all traffic is coming out of that particular firewall. So let's take a look at a specific scenario here. we have a Tailscale network set up. We have firewall A and clients behind it. We have firewall B and clients behind it. And then we have a laptop user. This particular laptop user is maybe, on the road, maybe they are out of the office, but they want access to both firewall A and firewall B. When you set up your Tailscale VPN, you would add firewall A as a device, firewall B will be added as a device, and the laptop will be added as a device. So when you are on your admin console in Tailscale, it will show you what devices are connected to the Tailscale network. So for this particular scenario, we have 2 firewalls and a laptop connected to the Tailscale VPN network. Now, what about communication? So here we have our 2 subnets. We have 192.168.168.0 network, and we have the 192.168.10.0 network behind firewall B. When we have our Tailscale VPN set up, we're going to allow the laptop, that is a remote user, to have internet traffic routing through firewall A, but we're also going to, in this scenario, have access to both the LAN subnet behind firewall A and the LAN subnet behind firewall B. So to get started on setting that up, what you need to do is first you would have to go to the Tailscale website and set up an account. So when you log into Tailscale VPN, login.tailscale.com, you'll be presented with the admin dashboard. You have the option to download the client for your device. So again, it supports Linux, Windows, Mac OS, your iPad and iPhone, Android, and Synology NAS. So yes, you can install this on a Synology NAS for the VPN. So once you've downloaded the device or downloaded the software to the device, you're going to need to first add your first device. In order for the Tailscale VPN to work, you need at least 2 devices joined to the Tailscale network. So first you need to add the device, at least 2 devices to your Tailscale network before you can start to use. So once you've downloaded the Tailscale client for your device, you can actually email yourself a link. And then once that's been done, it'll be bound to that particular device, and then you already have it set up. Now, again, as I mentioned previously, once your device is bound to the Tailscale network, you're going to be given a specific IP address. It's going to be the 100.x.x.x address. So anytime you add a device, it's going to be given an IP address from the Tailscale network, which is their own network for routing. After you've done that, we need to generate a specific key. So once you've logged into your Tailscale admin dashboard, you're going to go over to the settings option, or the settings option here next to DNS, and you're going to generate an authentication key. So with your authentication key, you can give it a specific name. We can have this key reusable. So this key can be basically reused on multiple devices, or you can give each device their own specific key. Now, in terms of expiration, as I said earlier, you can set the expiration of the key from either a minimum of 1 day all the way up to 90 days, which is 3 months. So once you've set up your key, you would generate the key, and then you can copy that key. Once this key has been copied, we now want to actually go ahead and set it up on the firewall. So when you log into your USG Flex H firewall, if you go to VPN and Tailscale, you will see a section for the Tailscale VPN. You would enable it and then also input that key that you generated. And then after you generated that key, you would just go ahead and leave everything else as the default settings. And then as that key has been added, it will automatically log in that device into the Tailscale VPN network. Now let's talk about what devices are allowed on the firewall side to your Tailscale VPN. Here underneath we have advertised networks. So you can select what device or what subnets behind your firewall are going to be allowed on the Tailscale VPN network. Once you've done that and you click accept routes, there's one more thing that needs to be done. And again, this is firewall A we're looking at. So configuring firewall A, We added the subnet to be advertised. The next thing we need to do is we need to go back to our admin dashboard on Tailscale, and we now need to do one specific thing. We need to go to Firewall A. On the right-hand side, there is a settings option. You want to go to Edit Route Settings, and then the route that we set up on the firewall will show up on the admin console as a route, but we need to approve it. The reason for doing this is because this is a security approach. Because if for some reason someone got a hold of your key that you generated, somehow they got into your firewall, or they saw you typing the key in, or you had it written down somewhere, even if somebody has the key, they can add a device to the Tailscale VPN network, but the routes will not work unless you've gone into the admin dashboard and approve of that route. So even though someone might have your key, they have to have access to your dashboard to approve any routes that are advertised for devices to be part of the VPN network. So what you would need to do is go in here, again, go to your route settings and approve the route that we've just advertised on the firewall. So once we've done that and we've saved that, the next thing you want to do is work on Firewall B. So Firewall A is already set up and good to go. Now we're looking at Firewall B. Same thing, we can generate a key. Now again, we can either reuse a key like we said earlier, or we can set up individual keys for each device. You input that key as the authentication key, add your advertised networks, and set up your accepted routes. Once this is done, we go back to our admin dashboard, we look at Firewall B, edit the route, and approve that particular route. Now you'll see we also have Firewall A and Firewall B as a name. You'll see here you can edit the machine name. So if you're wondering where the name came from, when you click on the settings, you can set up the actual machine name, and you can have that machine named whatever you want in this section here. So once we've done that, the last thing that we need to do is go to our VPN client on our laptop. So that laptop should already, once we've signed in and it's already been authenticated, we should already be set up. And all we have to do is open up our Tailscale on our device, connect it, and then we'll see that the login is successful and it is connected. So now that we have that set up, you should actually be able to access local devices between both subnets. But now, as I said earlier, what if we wanted all of the traffic, all of the VPN traffic, to go from our laptop through Firewall A? So in the scenario here, we have Firewall A with its subnet, Firewall B with its subnet, and we have a remote user's laptop. Currently, with the setup that we've already done, everything is accessible, but now we want to have this laptop push all of its internet traffic, or any traffic that's not bound for either subnet, to push all traffic out Firewall A. So in order to do this, we go back to Firewall A, and as I mentioned earlier, there is an as an exit node option. So you would enable as an exit node option, and then down below, we want to make sure that default SNAT is enabled. So what this will do is it will allow all traffic to push through the VPN through Firewall A over Tailscale, and then if you do a what's my IP, that particular IP address will show up as Firewall A, the IP address of Firewall A. Now, Firewall A has to be approved to be used as an exit node. So again, this is just a security feature on Tailscale side. So even though you've enabled that option on the firewall, we have to go back to Firewall A, go to Edit Route Settings, and now Exit Node will be shown at the bottom. So then all we have to do is check the option to use Exit Node, and then click on Save. Lastly, on the actual device, the laptop device, the software, we need to edit the exit nodes because by default it's going to be using the Tailnet exit node, which is basically the Tailnet itself. So what we want to do is we want to go through, edit the exit node, and select the USG A as the exit node. That way it knows to use that firewall AIM exit node instead of using the tailnet exit node. What we can also do now is check the monitor on the firewall. So on the firewall itself, if we go to VPN status and Tailscale, we can see all the devices that are connected to the Tailscale VPN through the firewall. Now, a couple of things we can see here. On the status section, if it says it's idle, traffic is not being sent or received from this device. If we see it as active, that means that traffic is currently being sent through the VPN. We can see the inbound and the outbound bytes that are going to the VPN. We can also see offline. If it says it is offline, that device is not connected to the Tailscale VPN network. That could mean that maybe your authentication key has expired, or there may be some other issue. But if it shows offline, that's something to check on your Tailscale VPN dashboard to make sure that everything is set up properly. And then lastly, we do have an option here that shows just a dash. And this dash basically means that the device is connected, but there hasn't been any traffic on it whatsoever. So it's been part of the network, but there's no traffic at all. Whereas idle basically means that it has not seen any traffic being sent to from this device. Whereas if it shows a dash, that basically means there hasn't been any traffic at all from the device. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how does the routes on the firewall handle the Tailscale VPN? In terms of routing flow, we can actually take a look at the routing flow on the firewall if we go and take a look at the Packet Flow Explorer. So the Packet Flow Explorer shows us the priority of the routing. So Tailscale VPN tunneling will always be implemented right after the Nebula static route. So right now it doesn't display it currently, but this is where the Tailscale VPN routing packet flow fits. It fits between the static route for Nebula and the one-to-one SNAT. What this means is that all of your dynamic site-to-site VPNs for IPsec on the firewall will always come first. So if you have any type of IPsec routing on top of, say, your Tailscale VPN, just be aware that your IPsec site-to-site or client-to-site routing will always come first. So make sure if you're having a problem, you're setting up the Tailscale VPN, and you're wondering, well, why aren't my routes working? Well, if you have an IPsec VPN that has routes that are very similar, those routes will take precedence. After the dynamic site-to-site VPN, we have our direct routes, then our policy routes, static routes, Nebula static routes. So if you have any static routes in Nebula, that will come before your Tailscale VPN. And then finally, your Tailscale VPN before your one-to-one SNAT and your default WAN trunk and your main route. Now, one thing that we can do is check the command line for the Packet Flow Explorer. So we can check if we're finding an issue. We can issue this command, cmd debug network packet-flow-explorer routing tailscale-static-route. In the CLI, this will show you the actual routing rules. So we see 4 different rules. We have rule number 1, destination, which is our laptop. It tells us to take the Tailscale interface as the next hop. Our firewall B, destination. Again, Tailscale VPN as the next route. Rule number 3, the Tailscale IP address. And this is a network-aware functionality. This is basically the Tailscale's, you can think of it almost as a default gateway for your Tailscale VPN. We can also see that it is also using the Tailscale interface. And then finally, we have firewall B's LAN subnet, which is using the Tailscale VPN. So if you're finding any issues with routing, you're finding that you are not able to reach a specific device, I would say go ahead and check this command to see exactly what the rules are showing for the particular routes for your Tailscale VPN. Now, what happens if you have if you want to disable the expiration of a key? Again, like I said, if you don't want to have the set 90 days for your authentication key, you can disable the expiration key. So it prevents it from having disconnection, because once the key expires, then the tunnel will basically, VPN will disconnect for that device. So the authentication key defaults to 180 days if you suggest to disable it. So, but you can disable this if you want. Now, what about if you've set the expiration to, say, 90 days, those 90 days are up? Well, it's a little bit of a pain, unfortunately, but if you want to set your authentication key to a specific expiration date and it expires, well, on the firewall, the first thing you have to do is go into your Tailscale VPN and actually log out. So this is going to log out the device from the Tailscale VPN network. That's why there's this log out button, right? Once it's expired, you're not going to be able to log in. So we're going to basically go ahead and force it to log out, and it's going to expire the current login for that device. The next thing we want to do is we want to go back to our admin console, select the firewall, and then we're going to remove it. So here we have firewall B, go over to our settings, and we go ahead and click on remove. So after we've removed it, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go back and generate a new authentication key. So we go straight to our keys, generate a new key, and then we can then go through the process of re-adding that key to the device. And that is pretty much everything for the Tailscale VPN. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for any questions. So far, I haven't seen any questions yet, but if you do have a question, please feel free to drop it in the webinar chat. I'm going to go ahead and stay here for an additional 10 minutes, just in case anybody has any questions, or if there's anything that I may have overlooked, or if you just have any questions in general, please go ahead and feel free to drop it into the chat, and I will go ahead and answer them. There's a question. Do you have a link to a help doc for this? Yes, actually, I do. I'll tell you what. If you email me directly, I can go ahead and send you the direct link to our FAQ page that actually has a documentation for this on how to set this up. Also, this webinar is being recorded as well. So at the end of the webinar, if you have, if you are a registered user, you should get a link at the very end to view the recording. Another question, we have 2 agency laptops that were unsuccessful in adding a VPN. Is this the solution? Can you be a little bit more specific? Was it IPsec, or were you actually using this particular Tailscale VPN? Oh, you have a few staff of personal computers that the VPN works on that will set up your IT. You guys didn't use Tailscale. Do you happen to remember what VPN? Was it just a regular IPsec VPN that was set up by IT? So you didn't use Tailscale. So those devices are, if you're able to install software on them, then yes, you can. You can use this, but just be aware again that the licensing for the Tailscale VPN is a per device monthly cost, and it's $6 per device per month. But again, this can allow you to use the Tailscale VPN and use the VPN and use the VPN to connect those laptops in. Because I know some people do have some instances where it's a little bit difficult to set up IPsec VPN or L2TP or SSL. This does make it a little bit more easier just because you only need to install the client. And then once the client's installed, you really don't have to do much configuring directly on the client itself outside of maybe setting up the exit node. But realistically, all your routes are going to be controlled in the Tailscale admin console. I see. Oh, okay. So they give you the batch file. Okay, so I'm assuming that it's going to be the IPsec VPN through the firewall with the, I'm guessing if it was one of our devices, a USG Flex series firewall. Am I correct? Because I know that with the IPsec VPN on the USG Flex firewall series, there is the option to use a script to install, like on iOS devices and for Windows. I know that sometimes when there's changes in iOS, sometimes that script breaks and we have to go back and try to fix it. This makes it a little bit more easier if you don't want to run the script or run the batch file. I know with iOS devices, you have to send that file to an iCloud and run it from the iCloud email to install it. But this kind of, this method is a little bit more cleaner, I feel, because all you have to do is install Tailscale. And then once it's part of the network, again, all of your settings are done directly on the admin console. So it makes it a lot easier. So with agency laptops, okay, I would give this a shot if you're having problems with agency laptops. Give this method a shot. Again, they do offer a free account or one free user with the Tailscale, so you can try it out and see if this works for you. And then if it works, then I would probably expand it out and see if you want to use the license-based version. Okay, I'll stay on for a little bit longer if anybody else had any more questions that came to mind. Um, Again, we will be checking to make sure to see that this will be available in Nebula. I know that some customers choose to use Nebula to configure their firewalls, so we should have this available on the Nebula GUI shortly, hopefully. I know that the idea is to have the local and the cloud-based GUIs match up. So, but again, I feel that with Tailscale, you do have a little bit more of an easier time. It's a little bit more steps, but once you get everything kind of rolling, it becomes second nature. So again, less configuration on your end devices and more about using the Tailscale admin console to set up your VPNs. All right, if there's no more open questions, I'm going to go ahead and close out this webinar. Again, thank you for joining today's webinar on setting up Tailscale VPN. I hope that this has helped any questions or any thoughts you've had about using the Tailscale VPN. I know that it was added, again, a couple months back. It was just added and it just appeared in the GUI and there wasn't much of a explanation. So I hope that this explains how to set that up. I hope that you will join me again next month on my next webinar. Hasn't been decided yet, but we should have some marketing out here shortly for the next webinar that I will be presenting. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon or the rest of your morning if you're here on the West Coast. And I look forward to having another webinar with you again. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon.